I'm not going to waste any time beating around the bush or prolonging this intro. Dragon Quest III is one of the biggest deals in gaming history that we have ever seen. People were camping outside on release date, waiting to buy this thing like it's the best game to ever exist. And I'm sure that to many at the time, it might have seemed like it was, and even some now still hold that same opinion. You've already seen how much Dragon Quest II improved upon the first game, and with other RPG franchises like Final Fantasy now being out that they needed to compete with, it makes perfect sense that you'd improve upon your existing game even more. So, how did it improve, and how does it fare as a game on its own? Join me as I talk about Dragon Quest III for the NES, and we can see why this game is as important as many make it out to be. The title screen is fairly basic, a step down from the second game in my opinion, but also, much like the first two games, the English title screen is different from the Japanese version. The Japanese title screen just being a title font in front of a blank screen. I do also want to say that I enjoy the menu music here. It's pretty nice and it sounds like a huge step up from the first two games. It's not quite at the level of an SNES game. You can tell it came out near the end of the system's life, and hey, what's happening here? Is this an actual opening cutscene? Yes, this game has an actual opening cinematic, showing this warrior fighting a dragon on top of a volcano. And it appears to be a very intense battle as well. Dodging and blocking the dragon's attacks, the hero cuts off one of its wings, grounding it, before dealing the fatal blow. It appears that the dragon still had some fight left in it though, and it hurls both of them off the ledge of the volcano, where presumably they both pass away. After this, it's back to the title screen, where we can make our own character, including their gender this time, and start the game. I went with a female character this time around, and instead of Mothman, I named it Moth Uwu. However, this doesn't seem to matter as much as everyone, including our mother, decides to misgender us. I would assume that we are hiding our gender to have people take us more seriously as a warrior, like, you know, a Mulan or Joan of Arc type of character. But within the game, female warriors and fighters are apparently normal, and since our mother calls us a lad, I'm going to assume it's just them not wanting to rewrite every line of dialogue just because of your character. The game begins with our character having their 16th birthday. Our mother wakes us up from our sleep and lets us know that it's time for us to visit the castle. We were raised specifically for this day. Like, whoa, okay mom, no pressure there. We then wake up and begin to walk around, following our mom through 2-floor houses to visit the bridge leading to the castle, where she tells us to remember our manners and then sends us on our way. The castle itself is actually a castle sprite that upon touching will warp you to the actual castle, which is a nice touch at trying to make the map larger than what it could reasonably be. The castle town is now a full-size town, and the castle is a full-size castle, while still being connected, unlike needing to compromise like what the first two games did. This is the castle of Eliahan, and the king is in the northernmost room. And can I also just interrupt this train to mention how I love the NPC design so far? Compared to the first two games, I've seen amazing variety just in this short section. We even have this little guy here playing the flute, and talking to him will tell us that we can only visit the king during the day, as the gate to the castle is closed at night. Yep, that's right kids, this game has a day-night cycle, and it actually impacts gameplay as opposed to just being cosmetic. I noticed a lot of older games had their day-night cycles actually be useful before modern gaming just kind of made it pointless most of the time. But there are still a few games that are smart with it. Like in Final Fantasy 15, the demons only come out in the dark or at night, and as the darkness spreads, the nights get longer. Without wasting any more time, I decide to finally talk to the king, who lets me know that due to the death of my father, Ortega, who was the guy in the prologue that fell into the volcano fighting the dragon, the world needs a new hero, and he accepts our petition to become this hero. I'm going to assume we applied to this some time ago, off screen, and now that we are 16, we are considered old enough to be appointed on this duty. Our target is the Archfiend Baramos, who is, as of at the moment, not yet known to the average person, and we should try and defeat him before the world finds out about this destructive power the hard way. The king gives us some gold, tells us to pick up our companions at the local eatery, and now the journey begins. Going to the tavern, we can see some people lounging around giving us some basic advice on how to form our party. You know, basic RPG stuff. Am I talking to the lady at the counter? She'll let us add characters to our party. There were 3 characters here to pick from, but there's also an option that says Another World in all caps that upon selecting has her tell us that by going upstairs, we can register more characters to our party. Wondering what that means? I go upstairs and discover that it's a character generator, where I can create and name my own characters. So I did what every loser with no life playing NES games in 2023 does. I texted my friends and I put them in my game. They'd let me tell them their classes, and then I formed my party. Lena became a merchant, Fapple became a goof-off, and Aphotic became a fighter. Due to the lack of magic in the party, we also have Zola, the mage, although she's going to be drinking copious amounts of alcohol in the tavern for right now. And I want to keep the merchant on the team just because it's early in the game, and we want to keep everyone as well equipped. So, you know, the extra gold from a merchant would be very useful. The mage and the fighter should be self-explanatory, but the goof-off is actually a unique class because it just sucks. That's the gimmick. It sucks. Its stats are horrible, and it has a chance of just not listening to you and doing its own thing, which has a chance of being very negative. Really, it's awful. But my friend picked it, and he is a goofball, so it works. From here, we begin the same strategy as the other games, and the majority of RPGs. Talk to NPCs, listen to information that's important, and kill everything we see. Just remember that the game does have time pass now, so it might be nighttime when you want it to be day, and vice versa. If you rest, time seems to pass to become day again, so keep that in mind if you decide to do so. Make the journey north to Reeve, where we can buy some slightly stronger items and also find this guy who asks if we have the thief's key yet. If I say no, he tells me about a cave to the south in the woods. So let's head there. Heading inside the cave starts to cause its own issues though, as Fapple is very weak due to him being the goof-off class. So to avoid the risk of him dying, I return back to Eliahan and send Fapple to bed and bring Zola, my mage, out. I might be going crazy, but I've noticed that party members also level up significantly faster than the hero does, so Zola can be caught up and leveled with everyone else in no time. For now though, I'm taking advantage of her blaze spell, letting her go and the hero deal decent fire damage when they need to. Once prepared, I head right back into the cave, although the cave is less of a cave and more of an underground hideaway from what I can understand. There are a few paths you can take, but if you take the right one, will pop out in the Tower of Najima, although my brain for some reason keeps reading it as the Tower of Nakajima. I'm presuming I have Megaton brain rot. Tower isn't too bad for a first dungeon. There are some enemies that can hit you with surround and some enemies that can poison you, but otherwise nothing here is too crazy. Once at the top, we can talk to this old man who will give you the thieves' key. I don't quite know what to do with it yet though, so I head back to Reeve to talk to the guy who asked me about it. He didn't do much, but at least someone else within the town told me to head east, and another guy hidden behind a locked door gave me a magic ball. With no other clues, we head east, although along the way I stopped inside the cave again and unlocked this door, giving me an agility seed. You see, a new addition that this game has are stat seeds. Each seed corresponds to a specific stat, and having a character consume the seed, we end up with a permanent stat boost for that specific stat. There are quite a few uses you could get out of this, but it's up to you specifically how you wish to go about it. From this point forward, I was also constantly switching party members in and out to keep the main people from becoming underleveled, but I tried to keep the main team of Aphotic and Lita as they were. I went east as instructed and found the Cave of Enticement next to this lake. And get this, the magic ball that I was given earlier is actually just a live bomb that blasts the wall here to a bajillion pieces and lets us pass. It's actually insane to see some old man just give a teenager a live bomb and have them carry it across the mountains, but I guess that's just how it be sometimes. The cave itself was a bit harder than the last dungeon, but I'm mainly chalking this up to me just having the worst party makeup possible, and move on. Partway through, Zola died because these magicians just don't know how to leave us alone, and since I can't cast Stop Spell, they just have to deal a lot of damage. Blaze deals about 10 damage per turn, so 4 magicians cast Blaze on one party member in a turn, they're pretty much dead. But, whatever, I made it through, and lucky for me there was a town nearby. This is the castle of Romilly, and here we can find a monster fighting arena. It's pure RNG gambling. You cannot influence the fight at all. However, if you win back the goal you bet times whatever number is next to the name of the monster that you picked. Monsters more likely to win will give a smaller multiplier, while those more unlikely to win will have a larger multiplier. You could reasonably make a lot of money if you sit here for a few minutes, so if you need it for some items or gear, do that now and progress. Talking to the king, we find out that a man named Kandar has stolen his crown and that the king will recognize us as true heroes if we get it back. We know Kandar is hiding in the Tower of Champagne, so we move. Going north, we reach the village of Kanave, and while we don't find out anything that we don't already know, we do also hear some bits of information like how a wizard could take down any monster with a poison needle. But they just don't sell it anymore. You know, we don't get good things anymore. Here's where the fun part comes in though, you see. There's a door leading to a back entrance of the shop here, and if you unlock it, it can take you to an empty room, although the path to the merchant's side is blocked by the merchant himself. Now, remember when I said this game had a day-night cycle? Well, NPCs obviously go to sleep at night, meaning that coming back around, back to the shop at night, we can now break into the shop and open this chest to obtain the poison needle. These small puzzles, utilizing the time of day, are great, and I can only imagine how much they destroyed a child's mind back in the day. Here at night, we'd also talk to a skeleton who lets us know that iron claws are a useful weapon. Why exactly this skeleton is staying alive just to tell people this, I do not know, but thanks bro, we'll use them. Heading west from this town, we access the Tower of Champagne. Another basic dungeon with nothing crazy going on, until we reach the end, where we encounter Kandar and his goons. Kandar immediately does the smart thing to do when confronted and runs away, leaving us to fight his henchmen. After a short chase, we catch up to him and enter the boss fight proper. Kandar and his 4 goons hit hard, and if you aren't high enough level, you will probably wipe, or at the very least he will kill 1 or 2 of them, especially when you lack a healer like me. Despite his strength though, you can just push him around and he'll admit defeat and give you the crown back. Return to Romilly and hand the king his crown, while he'll immediately make you king. Once again, it feels very weird to see every character in the game call my female character by male terms, but I know that the re-releases tended to fix this. It's honestly such a cute little moment though, because we just become king and can walk around town being king. All the townspeople treat you like the ruler, and some of them even have different dialogue. Like this one character will ask him to say the town of Noannuals to the north. When you're done celebrating your life as a king, go find the original king gambling on monster fights and force him to take his job back, and then decide where to go next. I could head to the east, but given that things are still fairly strong, I'm going to move north to Noannuals, where I can find that every NPC in the town is asleep, with the exception of this one old man who lets me know that the elves to the west had cursed them to be this way. To break the curse, we must return the Dream Ruby, but this seems simple enough, but given that we don't really have the Dream Ruby, I'll just have to go seek the elves out first. The elves in question hate us, by the way. Their belief is that their princess had been tricked and kidnapped by a human male, and that's why they cursed the town into eternal sleep. The only person in the town who talks to us is the father of the human male who tells us the true story. His son and the elvish princess were in love, and they ran away together. This is a pretty tragic scene, but it won't solve itself. We need to get that ruby, and unfortunately we know nothing about it or where it is. My bet is this cave nearby. Enter the cave and explore around and we'll meet an old man. He won't tell us anything useful about the ruby, but he does let us know about a healing spring within. Just keep exploring for now and be careful not to get assaulted by a swarm of mushrooms like I did, because these guys can put you to sleep, and that sucks. After a small, but dangerous journey, and maybe a wipe or two if you're like me, we can make it to the bottom. On the lowest floor of the cavern, across the bridge, we see a chest, inside containing both the Dream Ruby and a suicide note from the Princess of the Elves. She lets her mother know that if her and her beloved can't be together, then they'll be with each other in the next world. That's pretty depressing. But I guess it isn't an RPG without some sort of tragic backstory for everything. We can give the Dream Ruby back to the Elf Queen, who's heartbroken by the news, so she gives us the cure for the sleeping curse and pushes us away. She still doesn't like us despite all this, but you know, I get it. Breaking a lifetime of prejudice isn't something that goes away overnight. Go back to No Annuals and wake up the townspeople to talk to them and figure out some more information, and we can be on our way. To the west, we find the town of Asaram, which doesn't have anything specific for us right now. We have a couple of merchants, some of which will try to scam us, and we have some belly dancers, but nothing crazy. I did come back at night to see what's different, and even still, nothing crazy. Although the belly dancers are dancing now. I found a woman who offered to read my fortune, although she only did it with the lights off, and her partner crashed the party shortly after. Lena was not very happy about this, so I'm assuming that fortune wasn't actually a fortune. West side of the town, I can find this massive desert region, and inside, we find a pyramid. The pyramid is presumably the next dungeon that I need to complete, but upon entering I fell down a hole and wound up in a cave filled with skeletons of the non-living variety, and I was being attacked by mummies every few steps. So, I set out to try again, and fell down another hole. And I just noticed my health was getting low, so I tried to heal and saw that I can't use magic of either the offensive or healing variety. So I left and tried to heal on the normal floor, and then suddenly it works again. I'm guessing the pyramid is cursed and blocks out magic in some areas, but whatever. I go forward again, avoiding the holes this time, and try to rob some chests, just to see most of them were empty, except for this one. I touched it and it turned out to be a mimic, which immediately ate two of my party members' faces off. So naturally, I returned to town, saved, revived everyone, and set out again on adventure, this time following a different hint. The hint I followed this time brought me to this small oasis that houses the kingdom of Isis. The town gives me plenty of hints that I wish I knew earlier, like the chests being empty because of treasure hunters and magic not working in that lower pit. But whatever. Inside the castle part of the town, we find not only a bunch of cats, but also some kids singing a song about how to complete a puzzle, and most importantly, the queen. She lets us save the game so we don't need to make this long journey every single time. Grind, grab some better gear while in this town, because things are not very friendly and will hit you very hard, and then move on your way back to the pyramid. The pyramid itself, once properly leveled, isn't too bad. The worst offenders here are the mummies that can spawn horks, which aren't an issue on their own, but I guess you can see how a group of 3 or 4 of them could cause problems. The Firebane spell and a Fireball spell will tend to kill a whole group of mummies in one turn if you have the MP to waste. Reaching the room with this locked door, remember that the song the kids sang. Hit the buttons in the order. First, the easternmost button, then the westernmost button. The buttons are invisible, but honestly there are only so many places they could be, so once I figured out where they were, I was fine. Hitting the wrong button will also drop you to the floor below, so avoid doing that if you're weak and want to avoid the grind. Grab the key and skedaddle, because while there are a lot of treasures hidden within the pyramid, the limited inventory I had, especially as I was running low on MP and healing items, I didn't want to stick around, but it's up to you if you want to collect all the secrets hidden within. From here, I recommend doing what we did in the first 2 games upon finding a key. Revisit all the previous towns and see what we can find. Alahan has nothing fancy, just a room with a bunch of chests inside. The guard says he won't judge us for stealing it, so don't feel guilty and move on. The rest of my journey just lets me know about how to find the dwarves in the caves at the east of Asaram and how they don't want normal people to pass. But we can find a friend of the leader of the dwarves in the land of Portoga. Portoga is also apparently where we can obtain a boat, so this should be our next objective. In the meantime, I also stopped by Isis to obtain some of the treasure they had hiding around, and also visited the queen in her room where she gave me the wizard's ring, which refills MP but at the risk of breaking every time you use it. To get to Portoga, we cross this little underground passage that also has a cell inside, probably leading somewhere else we'll get to later, and arrive on a whole nother continent. Arriving south from there, we can arrive and find out that the NPCs really love Pepper. They don't shut up about Pepper, actually. The only other comments I get are comments from people telling me about how everyone from the east are barbarians, and then this one lady who's sad that her lover is gone. There's actually a horse stable here with nothing in it during the day, but if you come there at night, there's a guy there instead of a horse, and he claims to be her beloved, so I can only assume that he was cursed to become a horse for some reason, although I'm not quite sure where to go with this. Visit the king, and he will agree to give you a boat, but only if you prove yourself to him by getting him some pepper first. So to do this, he gives us a royal decree to give to the leader of the dwarves. Once again, I have to state, these guys really love pepper if they're willing to give you a whole boat for some pepper. But whatever. Pepper aside, enter the cave near Asaram and use the thieves' key to pass the gate where we can present the key to Norud. He takes you to this wall that he hits a few times, revealing a secret path. Passing through, then heading south once we make it back to the surface, and you can arrive at the town of Baharada, where we could theoretically buy some pepper, if the shopkeeper that sold it was available. His daughter was kidnapped, unfortunately, and even worse for us, his future son-in-law was dumb enough to run after them. But only after we appear, cause you know, we gotta keep it dramatic. Run after him to the east, circle back around, and then enter the next dungeon. It confused me at first because every room looked the exact same, but eventually I found my way through and past a locked door, just to find our old friend Kandar's minions loitering about. Beat them unconscious and go rescue Galen and Tanya before being ambushed by Kandar himself. He apparently dyed his skin blue and switched his hood for a purple one, but somehow boosted his physical prowess significantly. The wizard's ring came in fairly handy during this dungeon because there are enemies leading up to this area that can drain your MP, but I wouldn't rely too heavily on it due to the risk of breaking. Just make sure that you have some way to heal your team and some way to deal damage for your mage characters if you have one. I buffed my defense twice and just spent the rest of the match hitting them with my hero, my fighter, and my mage. Healing only when necessary, and eventually he will go down, crying like a baby, and we can return to Baharada, where we can finally purchase that pepper from Galen. Finally, after all that struggle, we can return to the King of Portoga and grab a ship. And there, the rest of our journey starts. With our newfound aquatic ability, we can begin to explore lands that were previously untouchable. One of these lands is the island nation of Edgenbear, who will turn us away at the gate and refuse us entrance. Luckily, we can pass through with the help of an invisibility herb, which we can obtain at the town of Lanso or the town of Su. There's nothing really required at Su itself except for some backstory surrounding the Vase of Drought. Hint, the natives were taken advantage of, and due to it being harder to reach, I decided to go to Lancel. Go to Lancel and obtain an invisibility herb and return to Edgenbear, use the herb and sneak past the guard. You will return to being invisible after you are inside, but that's fine, nobody will throw you out, they'll just act like they're better than you. You can visit the king and save, but the important part is in the basement, as an NPC in the garden will tell you you need to get all 3 boulders on the blue and white checkboard tiles. I am admittedly awful at these puzzles and it took me forever, but eventually I did it. I arranged the boulders and obtained the Vase of Drought. Let's go ahead and use it because the item gives us an extremely useful ability. Head northeast from Baharada and we'll sail past these small islands that after entering drops us at the island of Jipang. The people are terrified of the beast they call the Orochi, and heading north, we see these Tori. And at this point you might have noticed something. The people of Jipang have Japanese-style names, their leader is named Himiko, and the monster they fear is Orochi. They have Tori, and it's also just very clear that Jipang is based off of Japan. This is even furthered with the small islands the nation rests on, resembling the Japanese archipelago. In fact, Japan is not the only nation like this in the game. If you were paying attention, you will have noticed the other towns that we've visited so far, and the continents they stand on, all vaguely align with somewhere in the real world. This is actually really cool, and it really helps set a scale for how massive our journey is in the game. I'm not going to help Japan right now though. I'll keep moving on and find the village of Moor. Here, I find nothing too important, just bought some gear and moved on. But everyone here claims I resemble someone named Papa Tagero. Well, I don't know any Papa Tagero. But they do resemble a 16-year-old girl, so that's probably not a coincidence. And wouldn't you know it, if we explore around a bit, we'll also find out that Papa Tagero is actually our father, Ortega. I also find a little kid who gave me a water gun, but doesn't do anything. It's just funny to see that they give you a water gun. Leave Moor and head a little bit further north to reach our objective. Sail until you reach these shoals. If you remember anything from the previous game, you know what to do. Dump the vase in the water and watch the shrine rise from the sea. Enter the shrine to obtain the final key. The final key is actually very useful because it opens every type of door. So not only can we now open jail doors, but we can also disregard the other 2 keys, cleaning up some inventory space. After this, I decided to unlock the door just to talk to the skeleton who's chilling up here, and he warns me that some great evils have emerged from the pit of Gaiga. This is all I need. I don't have much reason to linger, so let's head on out. After leaving, the shrine returns to the sea, and we can head even further north to find Greenlad, which is almost completely uninhabited except for one lone house with an old man inside. He asked me about some staff that I didn't know anything about and claimed some pirates gave him a weird bone. Crazy flex, and I don't care much for it, so I bid him farewell and returned to Japan to handle their Orochi problem. The small cave near Japan is where we must head, and it's also a good grinding spot for those that might need it. Some of the enemies here might cause problems, but overall it's a very decent area that gives a lot of EXP per battle, especially if you get lucky with the metal slime spawns. Bump up a few levels and pick up the No Mask along the way, and progress. The No Mask has an incredible defense, but it will make its wearer permanently confused. While I can see this being completely useless to many, I might be able to see you getting some use out of this if you're just, say, trying to level a goof off or go solo. Head north to find a fork in the road. The northern path from here simply leads to a sacrificial altar, whereas the road to the east will show you the Orochi, waiting for you. Get yourself back to full health and pull up on Orochi when ready, because she will fight back. Right now she doesn't see you as too much of a threat and can be easily put to sleep, so I would take advantage of that. The big thing you'll need to worry about is her incredible physical strength and her ability to breathe fire on the entire party. She acts twice a turn, so hitting every party member with up to 60 damage at once could cause some severe problems for those without a dedicated healer like me. Buff yourself to protect from physical attacks and put her to sleep if you can, and just hit her until she dies. She has passive regen, but it should be no big deal if 2 DPS users just wail on her. Throw in a wizard casting Snow Blast for good measure and you'll be dealing damage faster than she can heal, and upon her defeat you'll be given the Orochi sword, another reference to the myth, and then Orochi will crawl away into a portal. Follow her through and you'll see that Himiko is on the ground and wounded, although it shouldn't take a genius to figure out what's really going on here. Himiko is actually Orochi, and her escape and transformation back to human form was a last-ditch effort to escape you. Be warned though, her injured form is no pushover. She has significantly more health and is no longer immune to sleep, and given that I was barely matched for her the first time, I figured I would let her rest for a bit. She's no danger to anyone in her injured state, and I'll return to finish the job later. By this point, your team should be very decently leveled, so here's a suggestion for you. North of Baharada we can find the Shrine of Dhamma, a shrine that can change any character's class once they're above level 20. You can change any character, except the hero, to any class, except for one. The Sage class cannot be learned by anyone, which makes sense given that the Sage is a very powerful class to have, due to learning all magic and having decent weapons. The Sage class can only be learned 2 ways. The first is by leveling a goof-off, like Fapple. However, Fapple's stats suck, and turning him into a Sage will leave him very weak. This might be worth it for you, but not for me. So instead, head north of the shrine, and instead we can enter this tower. Navigate through the tower, and on the second tightrope, not the first, take the plunge. Just jump off. And then again on the next floor, dive through this crack on the floor, and we can obtain the Book of Satori. The Book of Satori will allow anyone, regardless of class, to evolve to a Sage, but only once. I gave it to Lena due to her having the best overall stats out of the group, then changed Zola to a fighter so that I have a fighter that has damage spells and basic buffs. I kept Aphotic as a fighter because she's pretty useful as is, but I might change her later. After this, we turn to Portoga and head west, where we can reach a stand-in for North America for the game, and enter this little unpopulated piece of land to find the man trying to build a new town that you heard of earlier in Sue. He needs a merchant. Any merchant, and he will gladly take a newly merchanted Fapple if you provide. Fapple will gladly join the man's side and thank us for everything we have done, and now I can rest easy knowing that despite his stats, he's after providing the world with some use. This town will grow and change as you progress, so remember to check up on it so we can see how things play out. If you haven't talked to the Sioux yet, feel free to stop at their town since the old man let us know about a treasure hidden next to the well there. And if you have already talked to them, you'll probably remember a couple of them tell you about a tower with an echoing flute inside, so head to the western side of the continent. For me, it was fastest to sail there for more. Journey through the tower to the highest floor and climb these ropes, jump as close to the middle as you can, and you'll land on this platform, one of the chests containing the flute. Now, if you played Dragon Quest II, you'll probably remember that this flute makes a noise when you're in the same area as an orb. If you remember that the tower south of Portoga, the one with a shortcut to the Kandar cave in it, there's an NPC inside that informs you about sailing south to the town of Tadanki. So let's head to this town of Tadanki, where you can see the entire town acting fairly normal despite things being clearly in disrepair. Buildings are destroyed and there are poison pools, but strangely, all the townspeople just don't care. One of them made a comment about the Archfiend destroying the town, but doesn't believe it to be real and just continues on. Resting at the inn will reveal the truth, as when we awaken, the entire town is gone. The Archfiend really did attack, and there were no survivors. The spirits of those that lost their life on that day continue on, unaware and unable to move on. A tragic scene and a reminder that we must defeat this evil and save everyone else from the same fate. Blow the flute and reveal that the orb is hidden somewhere within the town, specifically by this prisoner. Speak with him now and he'll give you the orb, his purpose fulfilled. And if you return during the day, you'll actually see he changed his last words to reflect that he's glad to have given to someone. We will not let you down, random prisoner. Follow his lead and you'll head further south to Liam Land, where inside you'll find 2 women guarding a giant egg like it's Mothra, and nothing else. We find out the purpose of the orbs here. Mainly by collecting and placing all 6 of them, we can revive the Phoenix. Being too weak to fight Orochi still, I make my next goal to follow up on the pirates I heard about in Greenland when I arrive. It's empty. The pirates come back at night, according to their prisoner, so just pop back at night and begin talking. Most of them don't say anything, but we can't find out the pirates met the ghost ship because of them having a dude's thigh bone, and yeah, that's reasonable. If I was a ghost and you had my thigh bone in your pocket, I'd probably be following you too. However, they gave the bone to the old man in Greenland, so I guess I need to make him happy first. The captain, if spoken to, is actually pretty chill, and if you act surprised that she's a woman, she'll tell you about this town called Luzami. Despite all this though, there's still no sign of the orb. But we know it's here because of the flute and the pirates admit to have it, so we just gotta look. Luckily, the pirates buried their treasure pretty poorly. Underneath this large stone that we can move, then search the ground and finds this passage containing a red orb as well as some other items. Before heading there, I said check on Fapple and his town at the moment. They have a basic shop. You know, you gotta start somewhere, so I'm glad that they are making progress. Once again, the town does evolve and grow as you progress, so make sure to check up on them regularly. Proceed to Luzami and you'll see that there isn't much to do here. The island is forgotten and exists only to serve as a place for those exiled. This is because Luzami in Japanese is Ruzami or Mizaru backwards. Mizaru meaning see not, and also sounding like Mizaru, Saru meaning monkey, referring to the first of 3 monkeys who see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. Pretty much, these people are kicked away and ignored, as name implies. Nothing else here though, so we press on to try and find our next location. For this, I return to Lancel. Lancel had a very large shrine that up until now, we couldn't access, but using the power of the final key, we can unlock the door and progress. The old man inside will give us clearance to access the navel of the earth, but only 1 person can enter at a time. The hero is obviously the best bet here since they have the best stats and a decent selection of spells and abilities, so split up and get moving. This is actually the only other way to enter here, as any other exit to the town will spit you in another direction, which is a very nice touch. Enter the navel, explore a bit, and eventually find a floor that's just empty. Find the staircase leading to the next floor, and you'll find these faces on the wall screaming at you to turn back. Ignore them and move on, assuming you're on the right path, and you will collect the blue orb. Regroup with everyone and head to the only continent that we haven't explored yet, the equivalent of South America in our world. However, you will very quickly discover that the only town here is landlocked, and the only source of water that's going in is blocked, so we truly cannot pass. Or at least, that's what you think. Remember back to when I was crossing to Portuga and there was a locked door in the passage? Well, head back there and open it. It leads you to a teleporter, just like we had in Dragon Quest II. And also, just like in 2, there are several of these around the world map. If you haven't found them already, they might be useful shortcuts for the rest of your journey. And if you have used them, then you probably saw most of them were locked, barring progress until later. Taking the correct teleporters will pop us out inside the South American landmass, where we can make the journey to Samano. When you first arrive, most of the businesses will be closed. Even the church was not accessible due to people having a funeral. The man's cause of death was apparently nothing more than speaking ill of the king, which takes everyone by surprise since the king himself used to be a very chill guy by all of their accounts. Once the funeral has ended, and everyone goes back to their lives, we can see that this man was not the only one. Many have died due to the Tyrant King's rule recently, but the man in the morgue says he thinks someone else is using the king's appearance to deceive everyone. Sounds not unlike what's happening in Japan, so we should investigate further. Although, the guards won't even let us in the castle. Sneak in through an employee entrance and we'll see that even the princess is shocked at what's happening, and all the women prancing around near the king, while claiming to like him, have this awkward laugh going on, kinda like, you know, they don't want to be here. The second that you approach the king, he immediately calls you sus and throws you in jail. But luckily, the guard made rookie mistake number 1. He left all of our gear. Use the final key to break out and examine the other cells while you're at it, while also looking for an exit. If we prove to the deepest and dankest pit of the dungeon, we find the real king, begging us to make things right. Find the secret escape entrance, which leads to the cemetery for some reason, and we now know what must be done. Head south to the cave, and after the first floor, which admittedly wasn't that big a deal, you'll reach the second floor that immediately bombards you with chests right in front of you. If this looks too good to be true, it is. It's an obvious trap made to lure you to the end of the passage where the final 4 chests are all mimics. You can open them if you want, but just keep that in mind. Head south and down some stairs to the end of a pathway that will lead to the 3rd floor, where we can see the chest we want just hiding off in the distance. We can't reach it from there, but there is something else we can obtain here. The animal suit. It's nothing fancy, it just changes your appearance to that of a kitty cat. Adorable, but not much else. Head back up to the 1st floor, or escape the dungeon altogether and start over if necessary, and head back to the 2nd floor, where you can drop down a hole and plop in front of the Mirror of Ra. Now, we played Dragon Quest II, so we know how to use this. We just need to sneak up on the king and use it on him. We move at night, hiding in the shadows, using the worker's entrance we snuck in earlier. There's a guard watching the entrance to the king's room, so we need to be smart about this. Sneak up the tower on the right side of the castle and jump to the roof, sneaking in through an open window and shine a mirror on the false king, revealing himself to be nothing more than a troll. He might hit really hard, but just buff yourself a few times and you can take the hits and spend whatever time you have to damage him, and he will fall. He will leave behind the Staff of Change, and with the real king's power restored, the people of Samano can rest easy. This is it. We now need to figure out what to do with the staff. The staff can be used to modify your appearance, just like the troll used it for. This can be done for humorous effect like turning into slimes, or you could become a dwarf to buy from the elf village we saw earlier. But when you're done playing around with it, bring it to Greenlad where the old man from earlier was asking about it. The old man simply wants to shapeshift, and hey, it ain't my spot to judge, and in exchange he'll give you the sailor's thigh bone, which can allow you to find the ghost ship. The bone acts kind of like a homing mechanism, telling you how far away you are from the ship so you can find it. Track it down and board the ship, and you'll see it's populated by skeletons and spirits, although you do still have random encounters and there is a single lone human on board looking for treasure. While I didn't find any treasure that was really good necessarily, I did find a locket of love. One of the dead guys here implies that this was his locket and it was made for his lover, Olivia. We only have one other instance of the name Olivia ever coming up in the game by this point as far as I can remember, and we are running out of places to explore. So let's head to the promontory of Olivia, either by sail or by warp, and you'll notice that whenever you try to sail west, you get pushed back. Remember what the minstrel told you, and use the locket to lift the curse and reunite the 2 lovers, freeing their spirits and enabling you to pass to the jail shrine. Here in the shrine, all of the prisoners are sadly deceased, including the famous Simon that we've heard so much about. Luckily, Simon's spirit remains, and he lets us know to search his body for the Sword of Gaia. There's only one thing to do with this, and that's throw it into the volcano, like what the nerds in Luzami told us to do. But I figure it's time to go beat Orochi and put an end to her reign. I've had her rest long enough. Orochi, despite being significantly stronger than she was the first time, isn't much of a fight anymore at my current level. Her fire breath attack still felt good damage, but I thought I got a lucky crit in and Lena debuffed her enough that she had nothing standing our way with. With Orochi dead, the people of Japan come to terms with the tragedy before them, but the day breaks and we move on. I collected the purple orb and decided to check on my old friend Fapple before my final journey, and thus begins what I shall call the tragedy of Fapple. Fapple was born a lowly goof-off, a sad creature. but one with huge aspirations. He wished to make a name for himself, and thus set out on an adventure with the daughter of the legendary hero Ortega. He might not have been a fighter, but he tried his best to keep morale up, and help the party with whatever healing items they may have needed. But yet he still felt like he was due for bigger and better things. Despite his weakness, his trips across the world eventually had him realize maybe he had enough of being a goof-off, and became a merchant, planning on using his luck and charisma to make money for himself and others. This was before they reached a small clearing, claiming land on this new continent. Fabul stayed behind. He knew this is where his true talent and heart would grow. Thus was the seed that would eventually grow into Fabulville was formed. Although his wares were small, his meeting with the King of Portoga, the nearby Sioux, and likely his friendship with Galen the Spice Merchant allowed his town to grow. And it was a very prosperous town. Until it wasn't. Fabulville was still a small town with not many people living there, and yet Fabul decided to build a theater to hold performances. Probably a twisted remnant of his past self, and he started to fancy himself as a king. The town was not populated enough to handle all this work, and many of the townspeople living there barely had any rest. Everything became very expensive, with the theater charging upwards of 50,000 gold just to see a performance that only had one dancer and one minstrel, both of which were unknown to the greater world. The townspeople were sick of the despot, and they set their plan in motion. At night, fed up with their corrupted government, the people revolted, and stated that Fabulville was no longer just Fabul's town. It belonged to the people as well. The jail, previously unoccupied as the town had a non-existent crime rate, now had one single prisoner, Fabul himself. It was shortly after that the daughter of Ortega and her allies had returned to the town and found their former ally imprisoned for his crimes. And yet, Fabul was relieved to see them. Glad even, one might say. During his time as leader of the town, Fabul came into contact with the Yellow Orb, an item necessary for his allies' journey, and he kept a hold of it. Maybe he was planning on selling it off. Maybe he was planning on saving the day himself. And maybe even a small fragment of his former self held tight to the orb to keep it until his allies came. He parted with the orb for free, expecting nothing in return. Despite his sins, and those he had wronged, Fabul was, deep down, still a clown, and he knew that his friends saving the world would bring more joy and glory to the world than anything he ever did. It is time to make like our father and head to a volcano. Unlike our father, however, we won't be fighting any dragons. Just pull up as close as you can to the volcano and walk a short distance to throw the Sword of Gaiga into the volcano, causing it to shake the earth violently and erupt, spewing lava to the land into the nearby river, which will eventually cool and form a land bridge for us to cross on the continent here. Head south, over the now solid river, past a poison lake, and you will reach this cave, which just from appearances alone, has you know that it will be one of, if not the most difficult dungeons that you have faced so far. Statues lining the halls as if beckoning you forward, climbing a small staircase and then descending into the depths. The enemies here can be extremely powerful if you aren't prepared, so if you have a healer, give them the wizard's ring so they can refill their MP, but just be careful not to rely on it too heavily, as the ring does have a chance of breakage. For me, I made Lena my main healer, because due to a sage she has access to both heal more and rob magic, so her MP can be filled pretty consistently. Midway through the dungeon, I also found a sword for the main hero that can cast a powerful multi-target attack, so even though you could get attacked by dangerous groups of enemies, conserving MP was not a healer. With Lena as my main healer, and with the main hero as a healer slash magic user, and then occasionally bringing Zola in to cast a spell, even large swarms of enemies that can cast magic spells went down without a hitch. The biggest threats were the Marauders, due to them being able to attack twice a turn, as well as being able to numb the party. Eventually, after falling through a pit, rising through the other side, and traversing a maze involving some bridges crossing rivers, we eventually arrive on the other side of the cave with our villain's castle in sight. Cross the short distance to the shrine, and we can obtain the final orb. With the final key to our journey, we can begin the final stretch. Return to Liamland with all 6 orbs in hand, and replace them upon the altars. After all 6 are placed, speak with one of the twins, and the egg will hatch, leaving our feathered friend to fly around the room, seemingly very well off for something born 2 seconds ago, and take off. We now have a new mode of transportation, riding on the Phoenix to our destination, and I know just the place. A castle, surrounded by mountains, with no other entrance visible. Let's go punch Baramos in the face. Baramos' castle looks, surprisingly, not like much of a castle and more of like a small fort with destroyed walls around it. I actually really like the design here because you can mostly judge where you're going to wind up. Like, the level actually has a cohesive map design across the multiple floors. In the deepest pits of the castle, we can find a treasure room with another wizard ring, a demon axe, and a cursed helmet. The demon axe is a low accuracy but high damage weapon that you might want to hold on to for now, or you can sell it if the money is important for you and you deal enough damage anyways. Journeying through the floors, we eventually pop out in the throne room, although it's empty, with nothing more than a corpse upon the throne, furthering my idea that this is probably just some old castle that Baramos decided to just take up roost in. From here, journey down just one more floor, accessible from the garden, and we can find Baramos himself hiding amongst some damaged tiles upon an altar. Heal up, approach him, and let the battle begin. He doesn't know us, but he knows what we are here to do, and he isn't going to go down without a fight. And by God was he serious, because he hits like a truck. He deals a ridiculous amount of physical and magical damage, has a decent selection of spells under his belt, befitting of a sorcerer, and he can use a powerful breath attack, damaging the entire team. Even if you manage to block his spells, he will still get 2 hits per turn. His breath attack, and he recovers around 100 health per turn, so you need to really keep up damage and healing in order to make a dent in him. His AI is also fairly smart, and will recognize if you block his spells or if you cast bounce on a party member. I had to leave to grind for a few levels and come back, and after a finally grueling battle, I was able to beat him. Personally, I would recommend being even higher level than I was, because just to beat him, his passive HP regen was insane. Upon his defeat, the entire party will be fully healed, and light returns to the land. The Archfiend is defeated, our journey is over, and the people are singing our praises. We return to Eliahan, and we can end our journey, just as we did the first 2 games, when suddenly disaster strikes. A powerful earthquake shakes the world and a terrifying voice is heard. It is even more powerful of an Archfiend who will personally seek out our destruction, and wishes to do nothing more than make every inhabitant of our world suffer. The king, visibly shaken up by the event, breaks down and becomes useless. However, his advisor can still save our progress. No matter the task, someone has to at least try and defeat this fiend, and I can think of none better equipped for this than us. And so, we head off on our true, final journey. The 4 heroes of Eliahan set off to save the world once again. Only I'm having a hard time figuring out where specifically we are going. Well, if we head out to Baramos' castle, we can find the Great Pit of Gaiga, and it seems that the recent earthquake has shaken a few things loose. With nowhere else to go, we take the plunge, diving deep below the surface of the world and winding up in some guy's backyard. Alright, kinda weird, but we might as well apologize just for dropping in and like, wait, hold on. Did he just say Elfgard? As in the Elfguard from the first few games? No, I must be going crazy here, right? I mean, let's talk to this guy over here. Wait, a Tantagel? Oh my god, we really are an Elfguard all over again. This entire time, the world of Dragon Quest III takes place above the world of Dragon Quest I and II. Crazy stuff. Anyway, here we are, back at our old friend Tantagel Castle. Here, we can do what anyone would do and gather some information about what we're doing. Although, I'm sure, having already played Dragon Quest I, we already know. We can also, once again, find our friend Kandar, although he's currently serving time. He did tell us the location of the Sunstone, which is here in Tantagel luckily, as well as some general world-building expedition about Rubis, a spirit who created the land, and how Zoma is more or less the leader of the Archfiends. We also get probably the biggest bombshell of it all. Our father, Ortega, is known here in Elfguard. Apparently he didn't die in that volcano after all. He must have fallen all the way through until he wound up down here. Alright guys, we're fighting Super Satan 64, and our only chance is to once again gather information, figure out the weakness of the Fiend, and strike him down with the strongest gear we can find. Let's talk to the king to save, and then head off to the town of Cole, and hopefully find our father. Before heading out, I decided to check the cellar from Dragon Quest I to see if I could find the Stones of Sunlight, and instead the guy down there said he doesn't have them. He had them in a dream, apparently, but not right now. That's a bit of a letdown, but understandable. Let's move on. NPCs told me that you could reach Cole by boat, which doesn't sound very reasonable given that I actually walked there last time, but they're actually right. The water level here is far higher than what it used to be, and it locks off some regions from being accessible by walking. That doesn't mean you should just give up and walk for this journey though, because if you head north to where this one NPC told you the Zoma emerged from, we will find the future Erdrick's cave from Dragon Quest I with the same basic layout even. On the second floor though, we can find a staircase leading to a third floor, where you can find this giant walled off section of the cave. There is a door here, but very clearly something just didn't care and broke through. And a few steps forward, you can see a giant crater in the ground, presumably where Zoma emerged. I am assuming he did not have the keys for the door, due to Tantagel having very poor keys, if my memory serves correctly. Or, you know, it could just be because he's Ultra Saiyan. The big thing with this cave, despite how short it is though, is that the enemies here are significantly stronger than those surrounding Tantagel. And to make matters worse, all magic is blocked within the cave, forcing you to use healing herbs instead. I actually kinda like it. I feel as if it's supposed to be like a meta thing, you know, like early in the game you use healing herbs and rely on physical attacks due to not having magic, and this is technically an early game area. So chew on some herbs and punch everything that you can. There is a mimic hidden amongst all the chests here, but what you're here for is a shield of heroes hidden on the other side of the crater. Collect it and be on our way. You don't want to linger here more than necessary, unless you just want to grind a bit. From here, we could head to sea, although the enemies there were a decent bit stronger than those on land. So I decided to explore a bit before heading to Cole. I decided to go to Hawksness, which is in the same spot as it was in the previous game, although it isn't destroyed yet like it wasn't there. The people here seem to be having a fairly decent life. There's a woman expecting a child, there's a man freaking about what to name the child, there's a pond, there are horses, and more. Here we find the Oricon in the pasture with the horses. We also hear about an orb of light residing in the world above. That's probably pretty important in all honesty, so we might want to head back up for that in a bit. I decided to try and head to Cantland from here, and I actually got a little tripped up. It's a bit weird not knowing specifically where to go, but having vague memory from playing the 1 and 2 on NES and Game Boy Color. The town of Cantland is very similar to its Dragon Quest I counterpart, although there's no golem this time, as it hasn't been built yet. Luckily, a man in the town does state that he wishes to build it someday, as the walls of the town alone are not enough to keep out the forces of the Archfiend. We can also find Garen, of Garenham fame from Dragon Quest I, letting us know that he left his harp at home before setting out on his travels. We don't need the harp for anything, although you can use it to grind if you wanted. However, our biggest hints here are that we'll need to once again create a bridge to cross to Zoma's castle. The same castle that the Dragon Lord will one day reside in. From here, head south, around the mountains, to the shrine located within the Poison Swamp, and we can receive the Staff of Rain. And then we can sail all the way around to the island of Cole, where you can find the fairy flute, exactly where they said it would be, and about where it was the first time too. But more importantly, we can find out that the Sword of Kings, which is made from Oricon, can be reforged here. A swordsmith from Japan and his wife fled from the upper world when her wife was about to be eaten by Orochi. This is most likely the reason why a barrier between the two worlds was erected in the first place, and now they decided to reside here. The swordsmith is apparently really good at fixing and repairing broken materials, so if we can find all the pieces of the sword, he should be able to repair it for us. We also find out that the Orb of Light, which still resides in the world above, can be used to weaken Zoma, and that the fairy flute's true purpose in this game is to free Rubis, who is trapped in a tower nearby. Rubis is a statue, so she can wait a few minutes so that we can return to the overworld and fly around in a phoenix until we find a castle surrounded by mountains. But not Baramosa's castle, this is a different castle. And upon entering, we will be greeted by a talking horse, letting us know that this is the Dragon's Queen's castle. It's not just horses either. She has other creatures like dwarves living here as well. Visit the queen, who is very ill, as she will give us the orb, letting us know to use it to defeat Zoma, because she herself is with child and wishes to guarantee its future. She then immediately lays an egg and dies. We will take the orb that she so dearly entrusted to us and head back down to Cole, and reaching the nearby tower can start the next dungeon. The dungeon itself is slightly less complicated in design than the others, but it also has more puzzles and traps. There are numerous mimics along the way, although you can pick up the Armor of Radiance if you solve a small puzzle with some moving floor tiles. And eventually, after reaching the highest floor of the tower, we can play the fairy flute and free Rubis, with her giving us the medallion. Then, she will promise to return the favor someday. And I mean, she did return the favor, although it was, quite frankly, a few generations from now. We only have 2 more pieces to go, so let's try and make our journey to Rimuldar, and we can find that the cave to Rimuldar from the first game, you know, the one that housed the green dragon, isn't built yet. The people building the cave are working hard, but we can't wait, so hop back in the ship and sail south to Rimuldar. Rimuldar is very similar to the first game, and it doesn't contain any important items, but it does contain more information. For anyone that wants to know, our father, Ortega, set out to defeat Zoma, and hasn't returned, with some even claiming that he died due to not being able to form the Rainbow Bridge. Personally, I think that's a bit anticlimactic. You know, we find out that our father is alive, and then he dies off-screen before we can meet him again. Personally, I think he's still alive. We are so close to the end. The Castle of Zoma is just around the corner, so we need to go back to Tantagel and get that elusive Stone of Sunlight that we missed the first time around. Apparently, it's in a secret room next to the kitchen. I don't know why I missed it. Next, return to Cole and give the merchant from Japan the Oricon, and after leaving and then returning to town, the man will sell us the Sword of Kings. You now have a full set of legendary armor for our hero, and we have all the tools necessary for creating the Rainbow Drop. So let's pull up and show Zoma what's for. Visit the shrine, use the items that you need to get the Rainbow Drop, and then head to the small peninsula northwest of Rimuldar and use the Rainbow Drop to create the bridge to enter Zoma's castle. Cross the Poison Swamp and enter. revealing that the Dragon Lord must have renovated a little bit because it doesn't look the same as it does after he moves in. But there's still one thing that I know for certain. There's a secret entrance behind the throne. Just head down the middle path, ignoring every other door, and you'll get locked in. Wander around for an exit, and eventually we'll see that the statues will attack you. Survive all 3 waves, and press on. The next obstacle that you'll need to worry about are the movement tiles from Rubus's tower. If you can remember how they work, you will make it through. And there's actually a very easy path where you can just kind of hold the up button and the tiles will just kind of course correct and pop you out in the intended direction. I don't know if that was intentional, or if it's just something that happened, but it's very funny. Deal with a very small but inconsequential maze on the next floor, and after going through the floor after that, we will come to a very large and ornate door. Open it and move on to the bridge, where after crossing you can find a hero fighting a monster all by himself. It's Ortega, our father, and he's fighting a ferocious beast known as the King Hydra. He puts up a pretty good fight, but eventually he is beaten. And with his dying words, he lets us know to tell his daughter that he's sorry he wasn't able to save her. Don't worry, Dad. I'll make sure that Zoma pays for this, and for all the other lives that he's about to take. Further along this room, we can unlock a door leading to a treasure room. Once again, there are some mimics, but most importantly, we can find the Sage's Stone here, which is a healing item with permanent uses and restores health to the entire party. You literally have the final boss right up ahead, so take this with you. I cannot stress enough how much this is a useful item here. The Sage on your party might know Heal All and Heal Us, and your hero might know Heal Us All, but Heal Us All takes so much MP and Heal Us heals so little. I really cannot stress how much it is useful to have a stone that you can just heal with. Entering the final floor, Zoma himself will appear to taunt you. He knows who you are, he just does not care. He will kill you, and he will plunge the world into eternal pain and suffering. He walks off before sicking his minions on you, starting with the King Hydra. By this point, we've already fought a few Hydra enemies, so it's time to use that same strategy and the Sage's Stone to save MP and press on to Baramos' ghost. Yeah, you know, Baramos, his ghost is here. Although, he's not as strong as he was when alive, so you can beat him down fairly easily. Your next foe is once again Baramos, although it's a reanimated skeleton this time. Once again, he's not that strong. One cast a buy kill, maybe a sap if you need it, and he will go down with barely a struggle. Just a few steps in front of you is Zoma, so heal up, recover MP with any wizard's rings you have, and take a few steps forward to begin. He is not happy that we survived and decides to fight us for himself, and he is a powerhouse worthy of being a final boss. But there is a secret to making him significantly weaker. Use the Orb of Light and it will dispel his Shroud of Darkness, leaving him vulnerable. And also blue. This is apparently a glitch or a bug that exists because he's supposed to be blue and then immune to every spell. And at the beginning of battle, when you use the orb, it's supposed to turn him his normal colors and make him vulnerable to fire and sap. I do not know why it is reversed here. I don't know if I beat him in his stronger form, or if there's just like a glitch in the NES version, but for whatever reason, his color palette was flipped at the very least. If you are playing this game on the Super Famicom, the Game Boy Color, your phone, the Switch, or whatever, he'll be blue, and then turn his normal colors. And he will be resistant to all magic while blue, so just be a little weird here. Strategy is going to be different. He is noticeably more difficult than the previous two bosses, and he will recover 100 health per turn, but as long as you keep your team buffed and healed, he will be fine. Difficult as he might be, buy kill made the hero deal up to 200 damage per hit, and the fighters weren't too far from this either. So long as all of them are actively attacking or replenishing buffs when he removes your buffs, he will go down after a few turns. If you truly needed some extra damage, you can have your Sage cast Bee Dragon, and they'll turn it into a dragon and deal about 90 damage per hit. Although, as a dragon, they will not be able to use any items, so really only do that if you're confident and you have some other person on your team to heal. And remember, if he's blue, and you're playing any version other than the NES version, please make sure you use the orb first to remove the blue. With his defeat, Light returns to the land, although now without a price. The pathway to the overworld is sealed, meaning that we may never return home. And Zoma comes at us with a warning. One day, in the future, long after we have passed, darkness will return, and we won't be there to stop it. Unfortunately for him, the future generations will always have someone ready to stand up and fight. As we try to leave, this castle starts to fall apart behind us, and eventually we get sucked in just to immediately get spit back out in the cave where Zoma emerged. As we leave, the cave too starts to fall apart, and this seals up the pit from Zoma's domain. We make our way to Tantagel, where we are welcomed as heroes. We are bestowed the highest honor that the kingdom can give. We are Erdrick, the greatest hero that the land has ever known. And with that, our tale comes to a close. The legacy of Erdrick continued, long after their disappearance. Erdrick left the gear in the hands of strong warriors who could protect the future generations. And thus, the legend was born. And just as Erdrick left their legacy on the world of Eliahan, the Dragon Quest series left its legacy on the world of Earth. To this day, the franchise goes strong, and it's no wonder why. While some might say that this franchise is weak on story compared to other RPGs like Final Fantasy, I don't think Dragon Quest needs to be. It might be a story of good versus evil, but its sense of adventure, its world building, tone, gameplay, and more all hold the test of time. Showing our heroes visit a town on their journey, to defeat a tyrant king who kills his civilians for speaking out, by gathering a magical object and using it to restore the rightful king to the throne is the type of stuff that legends were made of back in the day. Might be an NES game, but it captures that energy perfectly. And I know that Dragon Quest fans wouldn't have it any other way. Sorry this video took so long, everyone. It's a much longer game than I expected it to be, so I tried to make sure that the editing and length stood out a little bit more compared to the first two to balance it out. I'm not sure when the next video will be. Please stick around. This franchise as a whole has appealed to me, and I will touch every mainline game. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.